So good morning to you all. I apologize in advance. My voice is going to be a little iffy. It's a lot better today than it was yesterday, which is a good thing. But at least you guys have the first class. It'll get way worse by the second class. So anyway, we're going to go with it, but there's probably going to be some hacking on my end to try to keep my voice relatively clear. So today we're going to talk through exercise 124. And the purpose really of 124 is to start to show you how you can take an AutoCAD drawing and transform it so that it's not just a basic line drawing. And there has been kind of a movement in the world of architecture to take what used to be just line drawings and really add collage and make them kind of spectacular presentation drawings. And it's very different from the drawings that you would produce in an office that are going to go be submitted to be built. And so we in architecture school have kind of latched on to this idea of collaging and making really fancy drawings and stuff, because what we do is culminate projects with a big presentation. And so while we're not doing the big presentations in this class, when you move on to your studio classes, whether it's 121 or 220 or 221, you're going to end up producing drawings like what are on the back boards there, and drawings that have color, drawings that have background texture, drawings that have people and collage and stuff tend to be well received in the presentation world. And when I was in undergrad, it was right on kind of the transition of this. And so there was a group of people who were very interested in keeping the old traditions alive. My first 100A studio, which was kind of it's the entry studio when you guys transfer to Berkeley that you would be going into. It's that first studio. We were not allowed at all to use the computer. Everything had to be hand-drawn. And so they were still in kind of that phase of deciding what to do. And so you went from that, right, to having really good computer line drawings where you spent a lot of time with line weights and that sort of thing. You could see that I'm still rather obsessive with line weights. I gave you the line weight drawing that kind of helps guide you in creating good looking line drawings. That will always help you if you can create good looking line drawings, right? It will never hurt you. But the trend is such that we need to do some collaging work on top of it. There are different strategies for how you do the collaging work, and over the next 3 or 4 weeks of class, you'll get exposure to several different ways of doing it. Today we're going to use Illustrator to do our collaging. Once we get into SketchUp, we'll be using Photoshop a lot more, primarily because the outputs are just different. Out of SketchUp, we're going to get kind of stagnant drawings that don't have live lines. Makes it much harder to work in Illustrator without the live lines. Since we have the AutoCAD drawings that have the live lines, however, I want to show you how you would go through collaging and kind of that process in the world of Illustrator. So exercise 124, I posted it, but in the post I have a lot of links that will take you places that will help get you things that I will use today. One of the things about doing this kind of a lecture is I will probably do more than you really should to a plan or an elevation or a section or whatever, because I'm trying to show you a bunch of different techniques. You should use your own kind of design sense for how much is appropriate, what looks good, what doesn't look good, because it's going to vary based on who you are, what your drawings are, what your personal style is. So just because I do everything doesn't mean you have to do everything. On the exercises, you might as well try everything. It doesn't really matter how they look at the end. It's about learning the techniques. But when I give you an assignment, right, for example, assignment 105, spend a little time and edit out the things that might not look as good, right? Get it to look good for yourself, okay? So, anyway, a couple things that I'll point out before I start. There's a zip file that I've uploaded that includes some title blocks that I've actually used in practice before for some of my drawings. The one that I use is kind of a casual one because I want it to be a little casual, so I'm going to show you that one and give you that one to use if you want. There are more formal ones that you can do. If you don't like mine, make your own, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. The other thing is font choice becomes really important. You've probably been beaten over the head in other classes about this is an appropriate font, this is not an appropriate font. right? Same thing applies. You want to pay attention, think about what your font choice is. I have a font that I really like when I'm doing like traditional drawings. There's a paid version and a free version. It's called Frank the Architect, the guy who wrote it. Named it that after all the Franks that are out there that are architects. And anyway, there is a free version that you can download here. Looks awfully like a kind of an architectural. It's a lot better than the standard city blueprint or country blueprint or whatever that come with these computers. And if you really want to pay for the pay version, there is a pay version that you can go to his actual font that he wrote it. I think the paid version is slightly better than the free version. For what we're doing, the free version is fine. So I've gone ahead and I've downloaded that, or at least I hope I have. Let me make sure it's down here. Right. I also, like I said, I have that zip file of the title blocks. I'm going to use those. You can download those and play around with them a little bit as well. So there will be some things that I refer to. I'm going to use some of the swatches that I created before that have the Prismacolor markers on them. So all of it's available under this the downloaded resources. Where are there? Downloadable resource packages. There it is. It's right here. So you see that this list keeps growing. So you're welcome to download any of it if you want, but I at least wanted to point that out. Let me make sure. I just want to make sure this font is actually here. And I can't remember whether I have it in here or not. No, I already have it. Okay, good. So before I go into Illustrator, I'm actually going to open up. Remember, if we were going to load a font on our flash drive, we have to use that portable application, the font viewer, to temporarily install the font because it's on the system. And I want to make sure that that's on before I move forward. So let me see where is it? Bless you. So I just want that installed temporarily. Okay. The rest of the stuff is already on my flash drive. So this is the file that I created. It's right now it's a PDF, and I just opened it in Acrobat so you guys could see it. It does have some line weights. If I zoom in a little bit, we'll see the line weights a bit better. Right? Sometimes it's hard to see unless you zoom in that they in fact do have line weights, but they do. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and close that for now, and I want to open Illustrator Cs6. I'm going to go to All Programs, Design, Standard Cs6. I'm going to go ahead and open up Illustrator. And then I'm going to go ahead and go to File, Open. And I'm going to open up right here. Okay, so like I said, the wonderful thing about the AutoCAD PDFs when you produce them that way is that you can actually come in and you can select the individual lines and work with them. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the layer structure here a little bit. And see how this stuff is organized. And so thus far in the world of Illustrator, we haven't really gotten into sublayers, the way that Illustrator organizes their lines. But if I click the little triangle here, we see that I have a bunch of what are called clip groups. And then within those clip groups, I have an individual, basically, line. And you can see that if I scroll down, there's an almost endless number of little tiny lines, right? That's how Illustrator works. In terms of its layer structure. So generally, we try to keep the little triangles closed because it's too much stuff in the way. Each of these, what are called clip groups, correspond to the viewports, right, that I created. I had 5 viewports, therefore I have 5 clip groups. The clip groups basically don't do anything, they're just groups. What I want to do before I move into anything is I want to select the main layer, and I'm going to create a duplicate of the main layer. Because in the world of Illustrator, when I start to mess with it, I'd always like to be able to go back to my original. And since we can just turn the layer off, it makes it really easy to duplicate the layer before. So I'm going to click on the little flyout menu here, the triangle with the 4 lines next to it, and I'm going to select duplicate layer 1, and that gives me layer 1 copy. I can rename it if I want, but I'm just going to leave it as it is. I'm going to lock it and turn it off. Okay? Let's just back up. If I ever need it, it's there. Okay? And I'm going to then start working with layer 1. And so, because these are contained within their own little clip groups, I'd like to release those clipping groups because I don't really need them and they're going to add to the complexity later on. So on each one of these clip groups, I'm going to select it by clicking on it, and I'm going to go to the flyout menu and say release clipping mask. Right? And I'll do that for each one. And you see it changes from being clip group to just group. So I'll do that for each one. Release clipping mask. Perfect. And so all of those are done. And that just gives me a little bit better access to these files, and it eliminates the fact that they have a clip around it, which we don't really need because it doesn't show us anything. Okay? So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to create some colored fill regions that could identify some of the the flooring or whatever that's inside this building, add a little bit of color, and that sort of thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what's called a live paint. And I think I talked about this a little bit previously in terms of how you do it. But it's hidden under here under the shape builder tool. And so if I click and hold, you can see that there's a live paint bucket. And what this live paint bucket does is it allows me to fill in regions that are completely enclosed by a line. And it works really nice when we're doing this kind of collaging work. So I have the live paint bucket. In order to create the live paint group, however, I need to have some objects selected. And these are the objects that I want to have it analyze. And one of the things that's important here is that you select all the objects that you think you're going to want to create the paint groups with. So before I even get to the live paint, I'm going to go ahead and do a Control A or a Select All. So everything's selected. Right? Then I'll come over here to the live paint group, or the live paint bucket. And when I move over the drawing, you see how I get the little cursor and it says click to make a live paint group? You can probably see that now, right? So that'll make a live paint group. And once I click, you see that it highlights a region in red that I can choose to fill in. Okay? So let me go ahead first and assign, and I usually do this with a bright color so that it's obvious what I'm filling. So we'll do a bright pink with no outline. Oh, come on. Apparently doesn't want to do it for me. That's fine. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in these regions. So let me zoom in so that you can see me do it a little bit better. And I'm going to fill in these walls. Right, and I'll come around here and I'll fill in each of those walls. Some of you may already have hatches that have been installed in the walls, in which case this part probably won't do much for you, and you don't have to do it. You can skip that part. So I have the walls highlighted. Now the next thing I'd like to do is to be able to highlight the floor and create a fill region for the floor. And I'm going to change the color to make my life a little bit easier. So we'll change to like a bright green. Right? Then we'll come across here and we'll fill in the floor. If I click on more than, or if I click on one of these regions twice, it's still only going to create one object for me. So you can feel free to go rather quickly through these. Oops, maybe not quite that fast. Almost there. Need to zoom in a little bit, which is Control plus. Right, and I held down space bar to pan. Alright, so those are good. I'm going to press Control 0 to zoom out, and then I'll press Control plus a couple more times to get back in. Alright, so I've got the wood done. Let me go ahead and switch my color again. And I'm going to do these tiles down here real fast. Oops, that was not a tile. These guys. good. So I'll press Control 0. Okay, so that was enough of regions for me, right? And I'm not going to worry about the elevations for right now. We'll come back and do the elevations a little bit differently. So I have those done. When I'm done with that, you see up here in the ribbon at the top, I can click on a button that says Expand. And when I click on Expand, basically what that means is create objects from my live paints, right? Make actual objects. So I'll go ahead and click Expand. And now, if I use the Direct Select tool, the white arrow, I can click on any one of these objects and see that it's actually an object, okay? Which is a good thing. So, you say, well, I'd like to get these onto their own separate layers, okay? And so it would be really, really annoying if I had to go through and hold down Shift and select each of these, wouldn't you say? Right? There's too many of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick one, and I'm going to come up to the Select menu, and I'm going to say Select Same Fill Color, and I'll get all the flooring in one. Much faster. Okay? So then I'll come over here to my layers, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer, and we can call this Floor. And I'm going to drag this little blue box that represents my objects up onto the floor layer. So now all of my green, right, is on that floor layer. I'll do the same thing with the purple. So we'll go ahead and go to Select, Same Fill Color. And then we'll create a new layer, and we'll call this layer Walls. And then I will drag my little blue icon that represents the walls up onto the walls layer. Whoops. Looks like I accidentally grabbed these guys too. Let me go ahead and select Same Fill Color. One more new layer. We'll call this Tile. And I'm going to drag the tile up onto that layer. Okay? So now, right, I have a floor layer that represents the floor. I have a tile layer that represents the tile. And I have a walls layer that represents the walls. Okay? So, I want to go ahead and start putting a little bit of color in so that I can kind of see these as a little bit of color. So, I'm going to go ahead and load my Prismacolor marker swatches. And I'm going to do this one with a little bit of color to it. So I'm going to come up to my swatches. Right? And you can see when we're getting to this point that I'm using a bunch of stuff that we've already talked about. Right? A bunch of stuff that we've already done. I'm just pulling it back in because this is where we really start to assemble all the pieces together. So let me go ahead and load that Swatch Library. So I'll go to Open Swatch Library, Other Library, and I'm going to go to the resources on my flash drive. And I'm going to go to Swatches, and I have my Prismacolor architectural markers, and there they are. Okay. So I want these walls to be kind of a grayish color. So let me go ahead and I'll select one and then go to Select Same Color, Fill Color. And then we'll, I don't know, we'll install kind of a grayish color. Okay, so that works. That's done. Let's go ahead and turn back on my wood floor, which is there. And let me go ahead and select it. And I'll go to Select Same Fill Color. See, I use that Select Same Fill Color or Stroke Color a lot when I do selections, right? And you can also see why when I did the live paint, I picked very obvious colors, right? Makes it easy. Okay, so let's add a little bit of maybe wood color to the floor, something like that. All right, and then let's look at the tile as our last bit. Let's select the same fill color, and let's put the tile with a little bit more of a neutral color, something like that. Okay. So I have those colors put together, and it looks okay, but I'm missing all the lines, right? And so if we look back here, right, we've got a couple things. One, we do have our original layer that has the lines that we've started messing with, but we also have the layer 1 copy, the one that's on the top that I saved at the very beginning. If I turn that one back on, right, you see that all my lines come back on, and now if we look at this floor plan, it has just a little bit of color into it, right, which is my intent. A little bit of texture. Now I can come back and I can say, you know what, the walls just aren't quite there for me, so let me darken those up. I'll go back to Select, Same, Fill Color, and then we'll darken those up a little bit. Right, maybe that one's a little bit better. You know, maybe I need to make them a lot darker. Kind of based on what looks right to you. Right? I tend to err on a lighter side. I think it looks better and lets the lines show through a little bit more. But again, it's up to you. Maybe this tan is a little bit too tan, So I can go back and say select same, fill color, there it is, and I could lighten that up. Maybe it needs to be something like this, a little bit lighter. Right? And you see that because I used the markers, I have a little bit of color lines, some streaking to it, and that was intentional. If, however, I didn't use one of these and I picked just a plain color, right? So let's come in here and let's get a tan-ish color. Oops. Select same full color. And I might actually go a little bit darker than I would normally because I want to illustrate this point a little bit better. Okay, so let's say I put that color in. Let me zoom in a little bit so we can see it. All right, there it is. Okay, when we work in Illustrator, it can be a very strong, flat color, right? And you guys probably experienced this a bit in the world of Charlie Harper, where it's a very graphic sort of thing. And sometimes you want to just kind of soften it up and add a little bit of dirt to something. And that's part of why I like the architectural markers, because they do that. But I'd really like to do the same thing with what I have that's existing here. So let's go ahead and turn off everything except this set of color here. And what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of a background texture. And so what I'll do to do it is I'm going to follow along, right? And I have it written up here with we already did the live paint, right? I'm going to go to 3.10 for background textures, and we'll follow along with this part. Okay. What I really need is I need some kind of a grungy texture to go in the back, a dirty texture, something like that. I think we've talked about this a little bit before. I may have gotten you to download these before. There's an example here. Oh, looks like they changed where it is. I'll have to update that link. If you type it, if you Google search Grunge Textures, there's Grunge Textures. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select all of these pieces. And so I'm going to go to select, same, fill color. I get all of them together. Now, there's a bunch of individual objects right now, and I want them to act as one object. And because I want them to act as one object, I'm going to combine them together. And I do that by going to the Object menu, and then I go to Compound Path, Make, right? Which basically means take these objects and put them into one. Okay? Grouping keeps the objects individual. Compound paths is essentially, yes, it's kind of like a Boolean operation where you're taking those pieces and joining them together. It is, and if we look at it here on our layer structure, that might be the best. Right here we have the floor and we have all the paths. Okay. If I were to group it, so Control G would group it, I get a group, but inside the group I have all the paths still. Okay. If I compound path this instead, objects, compound path make, it's not a group, it's actually an object that has it's one object. Right. So I no longer have all those individual objects. Okay. So I've gone ahead and I have that. Right, and we can kind of see it as one kind of dark object now. And so I'm going to go ahead and jump back here. Right, we already have this downloaded. Right, so I'm going to click on the background image in which you want to apply the texture, which is here. I'm going to open the transparency window. Right, let me go ahead and minimize this. So here I've selected it. Oh, let me go ahead and select it just with the black arrow. And I'm going to come over here to the transparency window. There it is. Right? And I'm going to go ahead and click on this Make Release Opacity Mask, right, which I've done. And right now, this works a lot like masking in Photoshop, right, if you remember back to that, where I have this black square, looks a lot like Photoshop. If I had something that was white on this, it would allow some transparency. I'm going to go ahead and, while this is selected, so you see I had this selected previously, I'm going to click on the black square, and I'm going to go to File and then Place, and I'm going to place in that grunge texture. And again, this is all written out, so you can go back and reference it. Let me go to my flash drive, to my resources, and I should have background texture somewhere. Grunge textures. Right, let's do one of the paper ones. right? And so you see that that looks kind of like paper shining through, right? I may have to go Control minus a little bit. You see that it hasn't quite covered my whole shape just yet, so I may have to modify this a bit, right? And so now I get that as a background texture. There's my paper, there's my object, okay? This may be a little bit strong for what I want, so let me go ahead and we'll delete that and we'll put something else in. I'll go to File, Place. Maybe I want something more like one of these concretes. I don't know if that would be good. Yeah, something like that. Right. So it's softening it up a little bit. So I have that in place. Now I can go ahead and I can change what's called the opacity, right? So that it's kind of a softer texture that's happening in the background. And of course, it looks a lot better on my screen than it does for you. So since you guys can't really see it when I do that, I'm going to go ahead and keep it a little bit higher. Yeah, you guys can see that now. So when I'm done, I want to click back from the opacity mask to my object itself. There's my object. And now that I'm back, we can go to my layers. We can turn back on the lines. We can turn back on the tile. We can turn back on the walls. And now we're getting where we have something more than just a flat colored object. It has a little bit of texture to it. Okay? So it's a different strategy depending on what you want and what look you're going for, but it is a way of giving yourself a little bit more variety in what you're creating. Okay? So now I'm going to come back, and as I said, I'm dumping a lot of different things on you as we go through this. There comes a time where sometimes we want to actually add something a little bit more, and I'll do this to the elevation view. And again, these are optional. You have to decide what is the right thing for you to do. And so I'll come back to my original layer 1, and actually let's turn everything else off except for layer 1. And we did a great job of deleting this altogether. So another reason why we create the backup is we can copy it again. So let me go ahead and say duplicate layer 1 again. There it is. Let's put it all the way at the bottom. Unlock it, and now we can work on this layer. So I'm on this layer. I'm going to select all, and I'm going to go back to Live Paint, which is right there. And this time, darn it. So this is because I didn't do the release these. So I need to release these clipping groups. Alright, so all of those have been released now. I could select everything, go back to my Live Paint, and I'm going to paint this time in the elevation view. And so once again, I'm going to pick an obvious color, and I'm going to paint where these walls are. And I'll do this in a couple different, just so that you can get a sense here. Right, I'm going to work on this one because it's kind of the simple one. But I'm going to go through and I'm going to paint a little bit more so that I have a variety of pieces here. And I'm probably not going to do the window trim. I'm just going to leave that. We'll leave white window trim. Okay? But I could paint it in if I want. Now that I'm done, I'll go ahead and click Expand, which gives me access to these as individual objects. I'll use my direct select tool, the white arrow, and I'm going to select this main wall, and we'll go ahead and create a new layer. And we'll drag that up onto that layer. And for now, I'm just going to turn everything off, and I'm going to work just with this wall. Okay? So I'd like this wall to appear, I don't know, to have a shingled texture on it, or a board and bat texture on it. If I go find something like that, and they're available, remember way back in the world of Photoshop, we did those tiling textures. You guys remember that vaguely, a little bit? Right? They're available here under Resources, Tiling Textures. Right? And there's a bunch of little pieces that'll tile together, etc. I have some already on my flash drive. I'll use one of those. It'll be one of these wood sidings or something like that. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look very carefully at my layer. And so on my layer, I have layer 7 and I have a compound path. That's good. Okay? If I had more than one path, I'd need to combine those together to be one compound path. And I'm going to go ahead and go to File and then Place. And I'm going to bring in whatever that tiling texture is. So let's look in here. Sorry, I don't remember what any of these are, so I know they're TIFFs, unfortunately. Siding, there we go. We'll pick that one for right now. Okay, so I've taken this, right? I need to scale it a little bit because it's a little bit large, right? So I'm going to use my black arrow, hold down Shift, make it a little bit smaller, right? Then I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste, right, so that these start to stack up. Right? Now remember, I can use the align tools, right, to make my life easy, so I can align to the center. Right, so I have those two. They look like they tile nicely. Let me take both of them, Control C, Control V for copy and paste. Put these two next to them. There. Drop this in. Looks like I need one more. Okay, so I have the siding put in, right, tiles, right? Then I look at my layer and see how I have all of those sidings, and then I have the compound path at the bottom. I want to change the order so the compound path comes before those, so it's on top of. Okay? And once those things are put together, I'm going to click on layer 7 here, right? And then I'll click on the little flyout menu, and I'm going to say Make Clipping Mask. And when I do that, it's going to use the shape that is green to cut out the shape behind it. And so when I say Make Clipping Mask, it'll make that piece of siding for my building. Okay? This is written out in tutorials, Illustrator. Sorry, I just want to make sure you get it. It's clipping mask and complex clipping mask, 13 and 14. Right? You can take it one step further. 3.15 is making it from a live paint. Takes you all the way through. Okay? This used to be something that I spent at least a week doing, because this was what we used to do. Like when I was in grad school, this is how we did collage. Things have changed. Outputs have changed. We use a lot more SketchUp now. We use a lot more renderings. It makes more sense to do the collaging in Photoshop, so things have changed. Right? But I at least like to point this out. So there it is as kind of a background texture. Right? Remember that I can select all of these. Right? Let me just go ahead and say select all. There they are. And I can change the opacity if they're too strong. Right? I can lighten them up a little bit. And then we can go ahead and come back to my layers, and I can turn on my original line drawing. You can see that the lines then show on top of this window. So a lot of times people like to do the same thing with the windows, and they like to put a little bit of like cloud or sky reflecting in the windows. So I'll walk you through that one as well. Again, this is repetition. I'm going to do the same things. So I'm going to select the same fill color, so I get both of the yellow ones. We'll put them on a new layer. We can call it window. There, turn these off. There's my two windows. Right? So now when I look at the window layer, you see that I have two paths. Right? Remember I told you that if you had more than one path, they have to be combined together before you could do the clipping mask. So I'm going to go ahead, combine both of those together by selecting them, going to Objects, Clipping Mask, Make. Change, oops, that was the wrong object, sorry. Compound path make. There it is, one compound path. Got my two objects. Let's go ahead and bring in the picture of the sky. I'll go to File, Place. And let me see if we can get back here. I knew it was in here somewhere. All right, so obviously that's really, really big. So let me press Control 0 and let's shrink this down a little bit. Maybe this isn't the most attractive sky in the world, but this is what we're going to use. Yeah. Something like that. Now remember, I want the paths to be on top of the linked file. There they are. It also kind of gives me a little bit of a sense of what it's going to look like and where these are going to show up. Something like that, so I can adjust it. So now that I have this and I have my path, I can select the main layer, come up here to the flyout menu, and say Make Clipping Mask. And it'll give me a little bit of those the clouds showing through. I can then turn back on the original here, and we can zoom in, and you can see that I've replaced where the windows are with kind of a sky background-ish. Okay, not the most attractive in the world, but it exists. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn back on everything. I'll press Control 0 so we can see it. Right? Obviously, I did just the floor plan and I did just this. Right? I could extend and create some landscape around. I could add some bushes. I could add some trees or whatever. But again, it's up to you for where you want to put it. It's unhappy. It's not allowed to put there. Anyway, so I could add some trees or whatever. Right now, the next piece of this is I need to start adding the title block and the rest of the information. So if you're doing a layout like one of the boards that you're going to print, right? Chances are you're just going to save this and then load it into InDesign. But you can do the whole layout here if you want. It's up to you. Since we're in Illustrator, I'm going to go ahead and do that in Illustrator. But if you want to save it and then drop it into InDesign, that works equally as well. The stuff that I have for you will work whether it's InDesign or Illustrator. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer, and I'm going to put that new layer all the way at the top, and I'm going to call this layer, title block, and make sure that that's the active layer. And I'm going to go to File and then Place, and I'm going to go find my title blocks to be able to put in. Right? So if I were hanging it up as a presentation, I probably wouldn't put a title block around it. Right? But since I'm trying to show you the whole process and whatever, I'm going to put some title blocks on just so you can see what it would look like. So let me go ahead and go to my resources, and I have my title blocks and scales here. I have a folder called Illustrator, and these are all Illustrator files to be able to drop in, which means that you can drop them into InDesign if you'd like. And so this is a 17 by 22. I have an 11 by 17, a 17 by 22, and a 24 by 36 prepared for you. So I'm going to go ahead and do a 17 by 22, and I'll go ahead and place. Cropping to media is just fine, and it will drop this in, right? And it should fit roughly on my page. Right, something like that, I think. All right, so I've got that in place. It looks a little bit hard to see, and the other thing that happened when creating these is they have a white background for some reason. They really shouldn't. So what I'm going to do is select the object and come over here to opacity. I'm not going to adjust the opacity, but I can change the blending mode just like we did back in Photoshop. I'll change it to multiply, which will make it transparent. Okay, so I can go ahead and I can click off, and if we zoom in here, we can get a little bit more of a preview of what this is. So in the lower corner here, I have drawing title, and I have name and address and that sort of thing, which would be the stuff you typically fill in. If I double click into the linked file, I have to do one other thing, sorry. When I bring it in, I forgot, on my computer I have it set to do this, right? When you click on the title block, right, uncheck this little check mark for length, right? And when it comes in, it will actually be a live object. There we go. Again, I'm going to change to multiply, and now when I get to this lower, I'll be able to double click and then edit this, right? So this can be whatever, right? And then I could say, you know, and do that sort of thing, right? It's sheet 1 of 1. Right, you get the idea. Okay. So this is available for you. You may have to do some adjustments. Looks like these aren't quite centering correctly, so we'll make a few adjustments to center them, etc. Okay. So I'm inside of a group isolation mode, so let's get back out of that. I'll press Control-C. You can see that this was designed to be a little bit casual. It's got a little overlapping of lines and that sort of thing. And so now it has a title block. The drawings aren't quite in the right place, so let me go ahead and turn everything on, lock the title block, and I'm going to move these so that they're a little bit more centered. Oops. That. Alright, so now I want to drop a few other things in. That's just plain ugly. We go to File and then Place, and again that link is unchecked for right now. And let me drop in. We'll do the drawing title. Okay. And so this is like a little, you know, title. You can put the title with being south elevation. You know, I could put a lot of times a little subtext is nice, but I don't necessarily need anything. If I don't like it, I can just delete it. Right? And then I can copy this. Oops, let me get outside. Right, and I could drop one in here. Right, remember, I can use all of my align techniques. So I can come up here and make sure that they're aligned, and then we could change this one to be floor plan, etc. Okay. I also have a few other things to bring in. Jump back out. Right, I can go to File and then Place, and I have a drawing scale. This is 1/4 inch equals a foot. And so I can drop a drawing scale in. Right. I didn't do a north arrow, but north arrow is usually a good idea as well. You could just draw that in. I can go to File, Place, right, and I can drop in. Okay, I have the north arrow, I have the title scale, I've got everything. I'm good. Oh, drawing note. Sometimes this is useful. Right, I'll go ahead and say OK. All right, this is if you wanted to point something out. It's a little annotation. Right. So let's say no, you still need, the reason the font's coming through is because I already loaded it. So let me get in here and let me, no, come on. That's being really convenient. It should let me move this, but it's not letting me select it, right? Where I can put this down. It came with the clipping. Sorry. It came with a clipping group on it, so I have to get rid of that. That's why it was Now I'll get the arrow back. Anyway, and so I can then go back through and change this line. It was supposed to have an arrowhead on it. I lost that arrowhead. And there it is. So anyway, if you wanted to put a note in, you could do that as well. So again, this is generally not as important for presentation drawings, but if you were actually trying to create a set, a design set to submit to some building department or something, that's a lot of times what you need to do. Okay, so today was really about how do you enhance your drawings in Illustrator. I dumped a lot of different things on you. If I look at this, I look at my elevation, I say, boy, that's ugly, right? But again, I was trying to show you the technique. I think this is working a little bit better for me. I might stay in the same vein with the rest of these pieces to kind of work through it. The other option, and one of the good things about working in Illustrator, is we can come through and we could say, you know, I didn't really like how that turned out, right? The windows, I didn't really like that. I like this, but maybe they're a little bit too strong, right? Let me come back to the floor. I'll drop that opacity down. Looks like I have some other objects on there, so I'm going to take this. Oh. Okay, so for whatever reason, I need to lock that title block because it wasn't letting me in to select this. Let me lock this as well. There we go. That's what I wanted. And let me go ahead and adjust that opacity down because it was way too strong, right? So that it's not showing as much. And then it ends up looking okay, right? And I go with it. So when I'm all done with this, I'm going to go to File. And generally, I'm just going to click on Save or Save As because it's a PDF file that I would be going to print. For you guys, for posting, you're going to go to File, Save for Web, which is going to create the web version of this. Right? Once you have that put together, you'll go ahead and click on Save. Right? And you'll save it as whatever it's going to be. Save. And then you'll post this file to the website. Are there any questions? No, I know I dumped a lot at you. Remember, you don't have to do everything, right? You may decide that you just like line drawing, right? What I'd like you to do today, though, is to put all of this stuff in and play around with it so you learn the techniques, so that down the road, if you decide, oh, I really need this or I really need that, you can then do it. Okay? Any other questions? No? Okay.